In this video, we're going to take a look at the strength of coffee, what we mean by the strength of coffee, and I'm going to put coffee strength guides to the test. So earlier this week, I popped down to our local supermarket and had a bit of a browse of the coffee section. There was a lot of producers, a lot of manufacturers there, different coffees, ground, whole bean. And I was particularly interested to see how many of them were still using coffee strength guides and were referencing coffee strength on the bags. And it fell into three broad categories. There was the group of companies that still use the terms strength or strength guide on their bags, and were using them as 1 to 5 to differentiate between the strength of their coffee. There was another range of products on the shelves that had no reference to strength at all. It was all about the coffee and the origin of coffee in the bag. And there was another group which was a bit strange in the middle that had numbers on the bag, 3 and 4 and 5, but no reference to strength. There was actually no reference on the bags as to what those numbers actually meant. Now, I've always been skeptical of strength guides, and it's something I've really wanted to put to the test. So I thought I'd buy some coffee, and I bought 3 bags, and they're from the same company, and I've rebagged them. And this is not how they appeared on the shelves. I don't think that would work very well. But I've rebagged them, so I don't really want to talk about whose coffee they are. I just wanted to compare what a strength 3, a strength 4, and a strength 5 actually means. Now, if I remember back to my early days of coffee, to me, as a consumer, I would have assumed that this produces a stronger cup of coffee than this. Strength 5 being stronger than strength 3. But is that the case? And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to put that to the test. And I can do that using something called a coffee refractometer, because this can test the strength of a cup of coffee. I can take a single drop of coffee, place it on the glass, and this will give me a strength reading. And it's a piece of kit I was given about 10 years ago from a fellow coffee professional, just as this business started to operate. And he advised me at the time that this would be one of the most important pieces of kit that I would ever use, and he was absolutely right. I use it so much to help inform my coffee brewing, my coffee tasting, my coffee roasting. Strength is simply the ratio of water to coffee solids in the cup. When you brew any coffee, be it a cafetiere, a filter, even espresso, you are dissolving coffee solids into the water. And it's the ratio of those two that determines strength. The more coffee solids you dissolve into your water, the stronger the coffee will be. And the less coffee solids you dissolve into the water, the weaker your coffee will be. And if we take the kind of brewed coffee range, the kind of filter cafetiere range, you might be really surprised to know that there's about 1.3% coffee in a typical cup of filter. The rest is water, so 98.7% water. And it surprises a lot of people to find out that the ratio is so great in terms of water. The range of brewed coffee is probably about 1.2 to about 1.5% strength. And the other thing that's surprising is that if you taste a 1.2% strength, taste a 1.5% strength, there is a significant difference in strength between them. My idea was to brew each of these coffees, and I reasonably expected that this would produce the strongest cup. This would produce the next strongest, and the weakest cup I would produce would be these. And I chose to use a filter brewer simply because that gave me the most consistent way of making coffee. And I repeated the test 3 times to see what would happen. So it's no surprise if I tell you that the results did not match in any shape or form the strength guide on the bags. In fact, the strongest coffee that I made each time was consistently strength number 3. And often the weakest coffee was strength number 4. And depending on which of the brewers I used and which grinder I used, this was sometimes stronger, this was sometimes weaker. In fact, the second batch I did, this worked out to be the weakest brew that I actually made. But what was really important is across all 3 brews, this was consistently the strongest, which in a sense completely flies in the face of the information on the bags. So what are companies talking about when they're talking about strength? To kind of understand that, we need to taste these coffees. So I brewed up 3 batches of the coffee. This is strength 3 over here, strength 4 here, strength 5 here. And I'm going to taste them to see if I can understand what the manufacturers are trying to get at when they're talking about these strength guides. Now, I didn't pay a lot of money for this coffee, so I'm not exactly certain about what I'm going to be tasting in the cup. They're about £3.50 for each bag. And to be honest with you, if it's £3.50 a bag, then the green beans that this coffee came from are never going to be that expensive and they're never going to be that great. And if your green beans aren't great at the start, it's highly unlikely the coffee at the end is going to be fantastic. But let's have a go and see what we end up with. It's actually quite a mellow coffee. There's not a huge amount of acidity there. It's just a little bit of acidity. And there's not a lot of what I would call roast flavour either. And roast flavour, it's often difficult to describe, but it's the flavour of roast. It's sometimes, if you look at it to the extreme, roast flavour can be the smokiness that you sometimes get from roasting. It can also be quite a lot of bitterness in there as well. And there's not a lot of that in the cup. So in strength 4, there's a lot more roast. It's the back end of my tongue. There's bitterness. There's a bitter residue at the end. And that flavour of roast is very much coming through in this coffee. And for strength 5, that roasted tone is dominating that cup of coffee. So what you actually have here is not a strength guide at all. It's how roasted the coffee is, how far it's been taking the roast, and how much the flavour of roast dominates the cup. We often get asked to recommend our strongest coffee. And it's sometimes a difficult conversation to have with people because the coffee industry historically has aligned strength with roast degree. So the more bitter the coffee, the more of that roasted flavour you get, the stronger people perceive it to be. And that's not exactly the case. And it's particularly different for a specialty roaster who doesn't want that roasted flavour in the cup at all. Roasted flavour to us is a flaw in our roasting. If you start to taste that bitter roasty note at the back end of our coffee, then we've not nailed the roast. We don't want you to taste that. We want you to taste the bean itself, the kind of origin, character and flavour of that particular coffee. Going to build on this in some other episodes of this video, and we're going to talk a little bit more about strength. If you've got any thoughts or questions about coffee strength, grinding, strength guides, or you've come across some packaging with some information on that you're wondering about, please feel free to get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and your subscribes are really appreciated.